If you don't like data or sleep, you should just leave now, because basically if you don't like data, I don't really like you. So anyone who's ever lived with me knows that I'm kind of obsessed with making sure I get enough sleep. Enough sleep is way, way up there on my priority list. And I also really like data because I'm a huge nerd. I think we already established this. This is a Zeo. So the Zeo basically is this fancy alarm clock, but I don't actually use the alarm clock feature. It actually keeps track of what stage of sleep you're in at what time of the night. So some of you might not be familiar with different sleep stages. That's okay. I don't want to scare anybody off. So an example of a sleep stage would be like REM sleep. That's one. That's probably one that most of you have heard of, rapid eye movement. And it's associated with dreaming, and so people's eyes move all around. And so this can identify when you're in rapid eye movement. The Zeo also records when you're awake, when you're in deep sleep, or when you're in light sleep. So light sleep, for those of you who just might be more familiar with sleep stages, is where they have mushed stage 1 and 2 together, but not including REM sleep. REM sleep is considered separate. And then stage 3 and 4, they're calling deep sleep. My purpose for wanting to get the Zeo is a little bit different from, I think, most people who would want to buy the Zeo and just their general target audience. Their target is for trying to get people who have sleep problems, and using this as a tool where the more information you have, the better you can use that information to help yourself sleep better. And they also have a sleep coaching program which costs extra. I had a free trial of it. Honestly, wasn't that into the sleep coaching thing, but probably I'm not a good source to really talk about that because my sleep is pretty good. But it does seem like there are a lot of people who found the sleep coaching to be interesting, so I don't want to just completely discredit it. Just personally for me, as somebody who doesn't have a sleep problem, it wasn't something particularly engaging. But what is really exciting and interesting is the data. I feel pretty good about the quality of the data. They've done at least one study comparing it to a more typical sort of sleep lab setup, and there's pretty high agreement between the Zeo and sort of traditional sleep lab kind of equipment. It's not perfect, but pretty good for what you could get at home. I feel like the Zeo is sort of within the same genre of purchases as my 23andMe DNA testing. It's making information about myself accessible that before would have been behind a wall and would have had to be something you would have to have some kind of problem to get access to, and you wouldn't be able to necessarily get just for intellectual curiosity. I really like this genre of products, and if anybody is aware of other products that sort of fit into this category, I would definitely be interested in hearing about it. Leave a comment below. So the way this works is that there's this headband. Just put the headband on when you're ready to go to sleep. Oh, this is gonna mess up my hair. I mean, it looks a little silly. I think it's worth it for the data you get. So on the inside it has these 3 little sensors. They're a little bit squishy. I was really concerned at first about the comfort of the headband, but I really haven't had any trouble with the headband at all. The biggest problem I've had with the headband is that if I go to bed and my hair is a little bit damp, I end up with like a ridge around here from the headband in the morning. So that's kind of a pretty avoidable problem. My brother, on the other hand, also has a Zeo that he got recently, and he's had a lot more difficulty than this with me. He's knocked off his headband a lot of times. These headbands don't last forever. You have to replace them every 90 days. And that wasn't really thrilling to me. It's like, oh, I've spent all this money on this thing, and then I'm going to be stuck every 3 months buying new stupid headband things. I've been not super good about replacing this, and so for the past month, I think, it's been on my back being like, new sensor pad needed, and it hasn't been my top priority. I don't really have a way of knowing, is my data from this month compromised, or what? I should probably replace it. They're not unreasonably expensive, it's just sort of an additional cost to factor in. When my first sensor pad hit the 3-month death limit, I decided that I should dissect it, because this is what I do. To remind you, this is what the original one looks like, and I peeled off the outer layers and just got the soft fuzzy things. This will go like that, and then inside you've got this thing. Underneath this part is just some padding, and then Basically what's going on here is you've got this fabric stuff that looks like it's able to conduct the electrical signals in your skin, and it sends it to this little button mabobber, and you've got 3 of them on here, which correspond with the 3 holes on the wireless transmitter. The design of the sensor is a lot simpler than I would have expected, and so that was kind of exciting. The Zeo has this cutesy little term it calls ZQ, that it uses sort of as a really quick way to tell how good was your sleep. And the ZQ is calculated by getting more points for longer sleep and more points from different types of sleep. Those are adding points. It is kind of a good way to, at a glance, be like, oh, this is what the quality of my sleep looked like last night. But the same number could mean a lot of different things behind it, so you really do have to look a bit more in depth at the data. This is very much designed for somebody at an entry level coming in not knowing much about sleep, and they're giving you a lot of information to sort of get you jump started. They even give you some population averages with this little wheel that they've made, and it's very cute. And so they have, like, for example, here's somebody in their 70s, their averages, and then you can scroll up, here's in their 20s. So I'm in my 20s. So I've found that my scores are pretty much above average on everything, which is where you have to get careful with interpreting your data here, because my scores are above average, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're better, because I have my own individual baseline of what I need, and my individual baseline for sleep seems to be just a lot higher than the average person. Not really like a video game where getting a high score actually means better. And since my brother has one of these, the first couple of days when he got his, we'd be calling each other and I'd be like, hey, what score did you get? We're very competitive. I can't beat him at a lot of competitive things, but I can beat him out at sleep. I get way higher sleep scores than him. One feature that I should probably take more advantage of with the Zeo, but I haven't really, is that the Zeo actually has an alarm clock function. So you give the Zeo a window of time you'd like to wake up in, and it picks when you're in a lighter stage of sleep to wake you up, if at all possible, because then you're supposed to wake up and you feel better. There's also a journal, and you can keep track of a number of different variables in your life. For example, how stressed were you? They have a whole bunch of different ones you can choose from. They're a little bit lacking with the custom variables. I'm kind of disappointed with that, because it's a feature that needs some development. Let me show you guys my best night of sleep. I think this was the night after having been to Universal Studios, and I just went all over the park all day, got there when it opened, left when it closed, and I was exhausted afterwards and got some very, very good sleep. Before I got the Zeo, I sort of assumed that because I had a consistent time I went to bed and a consistent time that I woke up, that most of my nights would look about the same. It's been really interesting to see the variability within my nights of sleep, because there's definitely an impact of my activity levels in the day and what my sleep looks like at night. My lowest score is right here, and it's the night that I had appendicitis, so this is from a few weeks ago. I got up in the middle of the night and it stopped recording, and that's because that's when I decided that I should go to the emergency room. And being like the huge nerd that I am, while I was in the hospital after my surgery, and I didn't go home to my apartment right after the surgery, I stayed with my parents for a little bit, and I didn't have the Zeo, and I hate that I don't have data on that week following the appendicitis, because I would love to see, the rebound effect, what was going on with all of the different pain medications I was on, and it kills me that I don't have access to some of this data. Ultimate nerdiness is I would have loved to have the Zeo running while I was in surgery, but obviously that's not an option, but that would have been really neat to see what my brain looked like under anesthesia. They have this cause and effect section, and I can look at the total amount of time I slept and how thirsty I was at night. What's interesting that I found is that getting up in the night to get a drink of water is associated on there with getting higher scores. Now the problem is that they're calling this cause and effect. And if you're interpreting this as cause and effect, then you would say that getting up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water makes you sleep longer. What's tricky here is that I didn't randomly assign myself to to get drinks of water on certain nights and not on others. This is sometimes called a third variable or a confounding variable. There could be some other thing that causes me to be more likely to get up to get a drink of water on a night where I'm getting more sleep than on other nights. I don't know, for example, because I haven't designed an actual experiment, but maybe on nights where I'm sleeping longer, those are nights when I've done more stuff during the day and so I'm more exhausted. Maybe I'm coming home, I'm stumbling into bed, I didn't get a drink of water before I go to bed, and so then I end up waking up in the middle of the night, getting a drink of water, going back to sleep, and I still end up getting more sleep because I was just exhausted. Another possibility is that maybe because I'm sleeping longer, that during that longer period of time, I somehow end up getting thirsty and need to go get a drink of water. But the way the user interface at the Zeo website is currently set up, it tries to make it look like there's a causal relationship where drinking water makes you sleep longer. And you could sort of think, well, that doesn't really make sense. But for variables where it does make sense, it's kind of dangerous. You can't start assuming there's a causal relationship there unless you've randomly assigned yourself to do one thing on certain days and one thing on another. Of course, it's not really feasible for me to randomly assign myself to drink water on certain nights and not on others, so it's probably a mystery that'll be unsolved. Is this difference statistically significant, or is it probably just a fluke? So I decided to run those data through SPSS. Right here up on the screen is a chart of the output graph, and you can see the average length of time sleeping is higher on nights where I went to get up and get a drink of water in the night. The difference is statistically significant. The p-value is 0.007, but all I'm able to tell from these data is that there does seem to be a difference between nights when I get a drink of water and nights when I don't. I don't know if getting the drink of water is the causal factor. So it's a little bit misleading how the Zeo calls the section cause and effect. Getting a drink of water is considered a sleep stealer by Zeo. If it's stealing any of my sleep, it's definitely not visible. Would I have slept even better if I hadn't gotten that drink of water? I don't know. I would have to do a randomized controlled trial. There have been a number of times when I've woken up and I've remembered a dream, and then I've gone and I've looked at my Zeo and I just came out of REM sleep, and that is just so cool. One of the things I've learned from getting the Zeo is that I take a lot longer to fall asleep than I had realized. Sometimes I have nights where I'm just really, really tired and I think, oh, you know, I'll go to bed 45 minutes early. And looking at my Zeo, I've realized that I'm not really falling asleep. Those 45 minutes earlier, I tend to end up falling asleep at the same time anyway. Like, I wasted that time. I should have just stayed up for 45 minutes. So Zeo is one of those companies that definitely understands how to use Twitter. They have very good customer service. I've been really happy with that. There have been a couple of times where I had an issue and I contacted them and they're just like all over it. They're really on top of stuff. One limitation is that the Zeo doesn't really handle naps well. It only counts your longest period of sleep in a 24-hour period, so that's kind of iffy. If you're taking a lot of naps, it's probably not a good tool for you. I'm hoping that maybe at some point they do an upgrade that addresses that issue. One concern I do have that needs to be addressed a bit better is that right now, when you buy the Zeo, you have to agree to their terms and conditions, blah, blah, blah. And in doing that, you're opting into allowing your data that you put on their website to be used for research, which I don't have a problem with my data being used for research. In order to use the product, you have to opt into it. And there is a way to opt out of it afterwards, but I kind of feel like it should be you get access to the product and then you opt in if you are interested in that. The idea that first you have to opt in and then you have to opt out is a little bit, I think that's a little ethically fishy. And they have made a blog post about this, and it's definitely on their radar as something to be concerned about. But I'm definitely really glad that I got the Zeo, because I went back and forth so many times about, ooh, do I want to spend this much money on it? And I left the order page up on one of my tabs for quite a while, and I was just like, oh, maybe, yes, no. I'm very glad that I did decide to get it. Full disclosure, they didn't ask me to make this video. I'm not getting paid for this. I paid for my Zeo myself. Ugh, too much money. I don't regret it though. I did come into their office and test their iPod application, which I did get paid for, but that's the only kind of money transfer that's been going on there. This is entirely just me sharing this because it's an interesting product that you probably haven't heard of unless you've been listening to me since December, because I talk about this way too much.